So in October of 2017, Nassim's Resonance Academy organized a trip, and my longtime friend and colleague, Teresa Collins, who's worked a lot with Thrive and she was on the board of the Resonance Academy and so forth. And she was one of the main organizers, and they just did a fabulous job of providing the optimal experience for the rest of us to get together and have things happen. Because what they did, things in Egypt work on bakshish, which is basically you pay people to get the experience you want. And so they had paid well to reserve the entire plateau, all three pyramids, for the entire night on the full moon in October. And as far as we knew, that had never been done before. So, and then they orchestrated the evening very well. First of all, there are always guards at the mouth of the entrances to the pyramids. And that night, the guards were to keep people out, not to hassle us. And so they orchestrated the night very well so that we could each spend a significant amount of time in each of the pyramids and in each of the chambers. And then they would, at certain times, the group would move so you didn't have any group that was too big at any particular time, unworkable in any particular chamber, because some of the chambers are very small. So these are the two most predominant tourist attractions, the Great Pyramid, the Cheops Pyramid, the Sphinx, and then above is a depiction, a time lapse of the North Star, because the relation to the celestial map is very important. So this was the delegate gathering for the Resonance Academy. This was the group. There were 170 of us. This is, if you can see my cursor, this is Kimberly and me. And it was just an incredibly wonderful group. It was like our Fireside Live group, a very savvy, very good critical thinkers, professional folks in all different sorts of walks of life, all of whom shared a common denominator of an interest in Egypt. And as we started sharing stories with each other, we realized it was like a giant college or high school reunion, just, a few thousand years later. But we'd all been drawn back, and for most of us, it was our first time there. Neither Nassim or I had ever been there, even though we had talked for years about all the Egyptian stuff. And I'll show you a clip from Thrive 1 about the Osirian temple that we did that was really relative to all this, because Nassim and I got to visit the Osirian temple together. And I'll show you some slides of that. It was very poignant for both of us. Here's another view of the Sphinx with two of the pyramids in the background. This is part of our group between the legs of the Sphinx. And this was Kimberly and me in the middle here. And here's Nassim. Here's Mohammed and Zach were our primary guides. And again, they had paid a lot to get the best guides who knew the most and were willing to say what they're usually not allowed to say. And they had all studied Nassim's work and were very open to it. So it was just phenomenal conversations. Here's Teresa, for any of you who might not know her. And these are the two other guides. Now, this guy here, I don't remember his name. Drew, maybe you can put it in the chat if you remember. His specialty was stonework. He was a stonemason himself, and he really knows stone. So he could advise us on the age of particular stones, what different stones were in different pyramids and in different, in the Holy of Holies, in the different sacred temples and so forth. So that was really helpful. And then this guy here was kind of my geometry buddy. He had studied my work as well as Nassim's and Marshall's, and he understood a lot of geometry. So we could keep relating on that basis. If you remember his name too, Drew, then you're a younger and better man than I. Okay, this is what they project that the Great Pyramid looked like in its heyday. That it was covered with shiny white limestone. Guess it was alabaster on the outside cover, really shined so that it was very bright, and then had a not a solid gold, but gold covered capstone on it. This is what's there today. Here's another artist depiction of what it looked like when it still had all of its facing stones and the capstone. So this thing is huge. One of the reasons I wanted to go was you just cannot imagine how huge it is, no matter how many images, videos, virtual reality, whatever. It just doesn't do it justice until you're actually standing on one of these stones looking up. It's estimated that there's 2.3 million stones, and it was built so accurately that the very center of the top of the pyramid is accurate to within supposedly like a few centimeters. The tallest building on the planet Earth today is the Burj Khalifa in the Middle East. And its center, it's a giant type of, a skyscraper with an Eiffel Tower type thing on the top. And they were only able to get that accurate to about 6 to 10 feet. So somehow thousands of years ago, somebody knew to make it that accurate, and then to have all these inside chambers. And that's just the accuracy of it. That's not to mention all the astronomical and mathematical data that's depicted on the walls. And then the big question, of course, is how in the world did they move these stones from the quarries and then get them set perfectly in place at these heights? So here's a side view of the Great Pyramid, and that is the one that interests me the most. And I'll be talking primarily about that one because it's the one that I've studied the most. So here's the entrance where everybody goes in over here, and you go down this channel, and I'll show you an image of the channel shortly. But then either you go down into the subterranean chamber, or you start going up the main stairwell, and then you can either do a sidetrack into the Queen's Chamber, or you can keep going up into, this is called the Grand Gallery here, and then the final destination is the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber has these huge mantles on top in this triangular form, and we'll go into that later. And then recently they found this big void, and they found this small void with radar technology. And then from each of the chambers, they have these shafts that go off, like from the King's Chamber, there's this shaft that goes off and points up directly to the constellation of Orion, which is kind of interesting because if you look down at this aerial view of the Giza Plateau, here's the Great Pyramid, here's Khafre's Pyramid, and here's, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I think Menkauri's Pyramid. And the position of these three pyramids is exactly the same relationship as the stars in Orion's belt. So literally they're set off at exactly the same angles in sort of the same spatial relationship. Here's the pyramids. And at Teotihuacan, the pyramid, they have also three pyramids in exactly the same structure. So what does that mean? We don't know. Maybe it was just that's how they kept track of some things. Maybe they used the channel to watch the movement of the stars. On the other hand, to build this entire thing, have this one channel facing toward Orion, may be a nod to where they came from. Beings that were capable of moving huge, 20-ton granite stones 500 miles from quarries through the jungles, up the Nile and then into the center of this pyramid. We couldn't do that today with any equipment that we have. So somebody knew something that we don't know today. Here's another representation of the pyramids in relation to Orion's belt.